Hello, my name is Salah Towler, and I'm here to talk to you about a class that I am teaching these days called the Mystical Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching, which was written 2,600 years ago, has been a bestseller for more than 2,000 years. And there's a wonderful story about how it came to be, and whether this is historical fact or not, I think the story is so wonderful and it really gives us a flavor of where this book might have come from. So here's the way I tell it. It all begins with a story, a wonderful story about a traveler. This traveler, who went by the name Lao Dan, or sometimes called Li Er, later to be renamed as Lao Tzu, or Old Master. This traveler was an old and very dignified man who had once held the illustrious post as the royal archivist for the Zhou dynasty. His was indeed a very high position in the government, and for many years he had been happy there. But slowly and eventually, he began to tire of the ways of the royal court and of the endless intrigues and political machinations that surrounded him. He had studied all the texts that were made available to him and had spent much time in meditation and contemplation. He had also spent time with the wild people of the forest and with their spiritual leaders, their shamans, those men and women, though mostly women, who had journeyed deep into the spirit world and brought back much knowledge for their people to live by. He had studied the stars and the moon and even the sun as it spread its life-giving rays upon all life in our world. He had thought and measured and pondered and spoke with these teachers of deep wisdom and insight that he was able to find in the capital of the Zhou kingdom, as well as in the deep forests and high mountains that surrounded it. And he had come to the conclusion that society as he had known it was crumbling around him, and he felt that he could not and would not be a part of it. No, he had to leave and head out into the western frontier, away from the cities and the civilization that he had grown up with all these long years of his life. So early one brisk morning, he climbed into a creaky and ancient, yet still serviceable ox cart, flicked the reins gently in the back of the equally ancient, yet still serviceable ox, and headed out into the world beyond the world that he had known all his life. This story would be a good one, even without all that happened after this moment. The story of a man who felt it imperative and even important to leave a life of leisure and high political rank to head out into the wilderness because of his inner guidance. In that ancient time in China, the western wilderness was equated with barbarians and uncivilized tribal people who were barely human. Why would any self-respecting Chinese person throw his life away to journey out there? Yet there is more. Away, far away from the capital, there lived one Yin Shi, the one who guarded the last gateway between China and the chaotic and dangerous world of the wilderness, at a place known today as Loguantai. He was not a mere soldier, but actually quite a cultivated man. He had also studied the stars and done enough of his own meditation and inner exploration to know a high being when he met one, and now he was about to meet such a one. One early morning upon the high walls that guarded this gateway, he saw, away off in the distance, a cloud of purple light coming his way. It was not the usual cloud of gray or yellow dust, but distinctly purple. Aha, he thought to himself, someone special is on his way here. He ran down the steps into the courtyard and ordered the servants to make ready to receive some sort of high official. It paid to be ready to greet such a one in the proper manner. After all, he might someday be freed from this endlessly boring and tedious post out here on the outskirts of civilization and be allowed back into Zhou proper. His surprise then was great when an old ox cart creaked through the gate and into the courtyard. After a moment, a dusty and equally creaky old man climbed down from it and raised his head and hand in greeting to Yin Xin. That was when Yin Shin saw that this was indeed a very special and high-level person. And he knew that it was not a high political qualification that he was witnessing in this man's being and manner, but one of high spiritual qualification. He saw in this open-eyed and open-hearted manner that the dusty old man standing before him was the one that would change his life forever. So, now we have a story about a traveler, and one whose life is changed by this traveler. And not only his, but the lives of many thousands, if not millions of lives throughout the next 2,500 years would also be changed. All in this one meeting between two men on the outskirts of the world. And here is where we find ourselves become part of the story. Once the initial surprise had worn off, Yin Shi came to his senses and went up to the traveler and led him out of the hot sun and into the cool inner room at the edge of the courtyard, there on the edge of the world. He hastily called for wine to be served, though the weary traveler instead asked for a simple cup of water. Of course, thought Yin Shi, this is a high being who has no need of spirits. He is already filled with the divine spirits of wisdom and clarity. We do not know what passed between these two men at this point. We only know that they spent some time together, and the old traveler shared some of his hard-worn wisdom with Yin Shi, who at one point asked for some of the traveler's writings so that he could study them further once the old man had left. Imagine his surprise then when he was told that the traveler, this Lao Dan, had no writing to share, who did not actually believe in writing things down for, quote, posterity. Real wisdom, he was told, was not something to be written down on bamboo slips, the paper of their time, to be gone over and parroted back to their teachers as he had parroted things to his own teachers. Real wisdom was alive and had a life of its own and could not be bound by writing it down, could not be imprisoned that way. Real wisdom, he had learned, was ever growing and ever changing and ever evolving and needed room to breathe and grow in its own way and its own time. The traveler was open to sharing what knowledge and insight he had in their short time together, but dismissed Yin Shi's entreaties to write it down for posterity. Yet Yin Shi felt almost frightened by the idea that this wise and learned man would be leaving at first light out into the wild edge of the world, never to be seen again by Yin Shi or possibly anyone else. So now we come to the last part of the story. We have come to know the traveler and the one other who has come into his life, this other one who has asked and even begged the traveler to please write down just a little of his hard-won wisdom so that others would be able to use it in their own spiritual explorations and been rebuffed. But apparently, eventually, Yin Shi got through to the traveler. And later in that night, the old man sat on a low table in the quiet of the night and wrote some 5,000 characters on a roll of bamboo strips and then left them there for Yin Shi to find in the morning, once he had gone on into his journey out to the wilderness, never to be seen or heard from again. For many years, this book that he wrote and left to Yin Shi, and really for the whole world, was just called the Lao Tzu. Eventually it was renamed Dao De Jing, the Book of Tao and Inner Power. And this book, which has come down to us from so many long years ago, is the second most widely translated book in the world. The end of this story is still being created. Or should I say that the story itself is being constantly renewed as each reader of this ancient book is inspired and illuminated by its wondrous words. Of course, modern scholars, especially in the West, do not believe in this story and are not even sure if such a one as Lao Tzu even existed, or that the book that bears his name was written by just one person. No matter. It is not really the story that is most important, although it is a wonderful story, but the book itself that really matters. Yet for myself, I believe and love the story and all it represents. A story can hold so much wisdom and guidance. Stories have been the way we humans have communicated and interacted for many thousands of years. This is just one origin story among many possible origin stories of that time and that place. It is just one that I hold dear to my heart and I hope speaks to yours. So that's the story of Tao Te Ching. I'd like to share another section from my book, and it's called Our Guidebook. And it's kind of the way I use this book and the way I present it to my students. So now we have a book, this Tao Te Ching, a guidebook as it were. Imagine that you are going on vacation and so pick up a guidebook on the local sites. It has lots of information of where to go for the best experience, the best view, the best food, the best music. Of course, one can just go and wing it, but why if there's a good and tested guidebook available? This guidebook, written some 2,500 years ago, has been around long enough to be tested again and again and found to be truly useful and even inspiring. You can start on page 1 and go from there, or you can open it to any page and find what you need on it. Of course, this is not the only guidebook of Tao. There are others, such as Zhuangzi, Laozi, both full of entertaining and colorful stories of the human condition and how to carry forth in a balanced and healthy mind, body, and spirit way. The main thing, though, as with all guidebooks, is that it is one thing to think about going on a vacation or a journey or a pilgrimage and read up on it and be an armchair traveler and actually going on the journey or pilgrimage. As the poet says, the proof is in the pudding. Oops, excuse me, I'm having a little trouble getting these papers. We can read all sorts of books on practices of spiritual enlightenment, but until we actually apply them to our own life, they are not nearly as helpful and even transformable. So where to start? It is not necessary to aim for complete spiritual enlightenment, at least not right away. How about just learning how to become more in touch with the sacred world of nature? How about becoming more in control of our oftentimes wildly fluctuating emotions? Or how about creating a healthier lifestyle so that you are not privy to every health challenge that comes your way? Or how about learning how to have more clear and balanced thought processes? Or how about creating a more fulfilling and fun relationship? Or how about learning more about sacred sexuality? Or how to live in a more balanced and grounded manner so that you can bend with the winds of adversity like the bamboo and not break? All these things and more are possible with the simple guidebook and the will to put its ideas and practices into your life on a regular basis. It can be challenging at first, but once you take those first steps of, quote, the journey of 1,000 miles, it gets easier and more fun. The path of Tao is not one of too much somberness and solemnity. If we do not laugh, says our guidebook, it is not really Tao. And what is not Tao or connected to the great source of all life will not last long. The practices, or at least many of the practices of Taoism, are called long life practices. They will have the most effect on your life and sense of well-being the more you actually practice them. But all along the way, there are moments of deep insight and joy. So I offer this little guidebook to you. As I already said, you can read from the beginning, or you can just open it, quote, arbitrarily and see what it has to offer you on any particular day in any particular moment. What follows here is not New Age thought. It is actually old age thought and practices. Some of these ideas and practices go back many thousands of years. They have been proven and used by millions of people since the Yellow Emperor ruled China as a shaman king 4,000 years or so ago. So I wish you bon voyage on this journey you are about to take, this pilgrimage into inner as well as outer travel. Remember, go slow, take in the sights, and enjoy the tastes of the journey. So I am inviting you to join me in my course on mystical Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching is seen by a lot of people as a book of philosophy or statecraft, but to Taoist people, the people who follow these teachings, it is known as a manual for self-cultivation. In Taoism, we call spiritual work self-cultivation. Like a gardener or a farmer, we are planting these seeds of knowledge, experience, and spiritual understanding, and then tenderly tending them as they grow and flourish and bloom, so then we can enjoy the fruits, the flowers of our work, our inner work, our self-cultivation. So in this course, we'll be doing many practices. Qigong practices, meditation practices, Neigong, Neidan practices, many of which are actually embedded in the very text. If you have studied Taoism, which I have for 35 or so years, or even just begun to have a little bit of an understanding of what Taoism is about, you will be able to see and learn these practices that are very clearly in the text itself. So we'll be talking about these principles like Wu Wei, watercourse way, going slowly, or Manzo, Pu, or the Ankara block, or the simplicity. Other ideas about being natural, being authentic. In Taoism, they have a term for a very high-level person called a Zhenren. A Zhenren, which is sometimes translated in books as the perfect man, which is incorrect. For instance, Ren means person, not man, but Zhenren means something like authentic person. Someone who is authentically themselves, who understands themselves authentically, and is then able to express themselves into the world around them in a very authentic manner. Which sounds like a very simple thing, but most people, especially in this modern world, have no idea who they are authentically or how to express themselves authentically. So as we explore these chapters in this weekly class, we will do the practices, we will listen to more of the stories, some from Zhuangzi, who's a little later, also a very important part of Taoism, and who is a lot of fun. And we'll get a chance to ask questions, share your ideas, your experiences with this. And I want to share with you one last story. This is a story that I wrote some years ago, and it's about this principle, Wu Wei, which is one of, or perhaps the most important principle in all of Taoism. Wu Wei, translated directly into English, is not doing, but it means so much more than not doing. It means not overdoing, not overextending, using just enough energy and time to get the job done and no more. It means not forcing yourself through life and not forcing your opinions and your ideas on other people. It brings in those other principles of being natural, being spontaneous, being simple. They all come together in this Wu Wei way. So I have a little story here to share with you about Wu Wei in practice, in the real world. So it goes like this. There was once an emperor who had many advisors in his court, all of whom tried to get him to listen to them and them only. He became frustrated about the whole situation, so he winnowed them down until there were only two groups left, the Confucians and the Taoists. The Confucians were all serious scholars who tried to tell the emperor that all he had to do was listen to them and reinstate the old rituals and rites, and then his kingdom would be prosperous. The Taoists were another matter altogether. They did not try to curry his favor. They did not whisper in his ears about how they were the ones he should be listening to. They did not seem to care either way. Really, it was up to him if he wanted to take their advice in ruling his kingdom. If not, they were just as happy to go on with what they were doing, which involved a lot of sitting around in what they called zowang, or sitting and forgetting meditation. Or else he could find them out in the many imperial gardens, doing a strange, slow-moving type of dance that reminded him of great birds flying through the sky. He finally got so frustrated and exasperated that he decided to hold a contest. Both groups were invited into a large room at the edge of the imperial gardens. There was no furniture, no art of any kind, just two completely blank walls facing each other, with a wide curtain drawn to the middle of the room, separating each wall. They were told that each group was to produce a painting, a great work of art. The emperor himself would be the judge of who came up with the best painting and would thereby earn his royal ear. They would have 1 week and 1 week only to produce such a painting. The emperor and his retinue then left the room, and the two groups got busy with their painting. Actually, it was the Confucians who got busy. They immediately ordered all the colors of ink available to them and got to work right away on their painting. The Taoists, on the other hand, just ordered a few dozen very soft cloths, the softest that could be found. They then began doing their strange bird-like movements while polishing the wall in front of them with the very soft cloths. This behavior went on for the rest of the week. The Confucians worked on their grand painting, stopping often to peruse ancient manuscripts, and the Taoists continued to do their graceful, slow movements while continuing to polish the blank wall. Finally came the day for the emperor to judge the works of art that the two groups had created. First he went over to the Confucian side of the room. There he saw a magnificent painting which covered the entire wall. It contained his palace, his gardens, and even the surrounding plains. There was so much detail in it that it was as if he could see into the royal court with a tiny figure of himself on the royal throne, no doubt giving wise and sagacious orders to his ministers. The emperor spent quite some time admiring this magnificent painting, sure that the Taoists could not match it. Then he turned around and visited the other side of the room, where the Taoists were still moving through the air with their graceful and lovely movements. But imagine his surprise when he looked at the wall, only to find a completely blank wall. True, it was very smooth and shiny after the many applications with the soft cloths, but there was no painting there. No magnificent representation of his royal court, and certainly no cunning and creative scene of the emperor himself on his throne. "What?" he thundered. "You did not even try to paint anything. Is this how you try to curry my favor?" The Taoists then stopped their elegant dance and ordered the curtain between the two walls to be removed. Then the emperor saw not a blank wall after all, but because of the very smooth and shiny surface there, a reflection of the Confucian's painting. But because of the play of light coming into the room, the painting seemed to be a moving painting. He could see the waves and the lakes in the imperial garden moving and flowing, and he could see birds flying gracefully overhead. And when he looked into the royal throne room, he saw himself there, not just sitting on the throne, but striding up and down the hall, making all kinds of grand pronouncements. He stood there in surprise and delight. How did they accomplish this? He asked the Taoists. "Your Majesty," they said in unison, dropping to their knees in a graceful kowtow. "We did not do anything to make this painting happen. All we did was polish the wall, so that the painting accomplished itself." We knew that our fellows on the other side of the room were working so hard, hoping to accomplish something that would please you and even perhaps allow them to receive your royal favor. Yet all we did was move our chi through our bodies and use that very chi to slowly polish the wall in front of us, so that it would, when the time came, not only reflect the painting of the esteemed Confucians, but allow it to come alive on our side of the room. The emperor then bade them stand up and proclaimed them the winners of the contest. And it is said that they taught him many things, so at the end of his life he was seen to be mounting a dragon and flying off to the heavens. So in this course I'll be sharing other stories, many practices. I hope you can join me. Each class is recorded on Zoom, so if you can make the live class, I send a recording to everyone. And I'll put the link down below here, and if you don't have time or are not moved to come to the class, I do have a book called Practicing the Tao Te Ching, 81 Steps on the Way, that was published some years ago by Sound True, wonderful publisher, and in that I have each verse and a commentary or explanation of what the verse means, and a practice, a simple Qigong meditation lifestyle practice for every one of the 81 chapters. So I hope you will join me. I hope you will explore, if not with me, on your own with other teachers. Tao Te Ching is so powerful and so wonderful and so important that its pages, its teachings can help us all to be spiritually, emotionally, even psychologically fulfilled. So thank you very much for your attention. Bye for now.